Dr. Bounds and Dr. De Silva. It's a joy to be with you. I am in very sunny Honolulu, Hawaii, and taping this for you, the introduction that you've asked for. It's a joy to be with you. Later this afternoon, I will be marrying our daughter, Catherine, at a beautiful setting about 20 miles outside of Honolulu on the seashore. I want to share a little bit with you about my ministry, a little bit about myself. I'm currently serving the Chisholm United Methodist Church in Chisholm, Minnesota. I'll share a little bit about that for you. Chisholm, Minnesota is in northeastern Minnesota near Lake Superior on the Iron Range of Minnesota. The town is located technically on the Mesaba Iron Range, and is in the midst of a number of small towns that make up the Iron Range. The Iron Range is actually only about a mile or 2 miles wide and about 80 miles long. Here's a little bit of the Iron Ranges here of the Lake Superior region, and the star indicates where we're at on the Mesaba Iron Range. I could share a great deal of information about iron mining, but I'm not going to have the time to do that today. But I want to share some significant insights if I can. A little bit about myself. I'm Reverend Terry Tilton. I'm an ordained United Methodist minister. I have 41 years of ministry. When I retired in 2015 from a church about 6 miles away from my current ministry site at Hibbing, Minnesota, I have been a part of the Minnesota Annual Conference all of those years. Currently, my position is retired supply pastor at the Chisholm United Methodist Church. I actually started serving that church in 2012 when it became an orphan out of a realignment of churches, and have continued to serve it since my effective retirement time. I am married. My wife Cheryl, we are married for 44 years and have 2 grown children, a son Evan and a daughter Catherine. As I indicated, I did retire, but I continue to supply, and we're retired supply pastor for the Chisholm United Methodist Church. I put in about 8 to 10 hours weekly for the church, and then I'm supported by a part-time secretary. A little bit about the Iron Range. Iron ore was discovered in 1860 on the Iron Range, and initially the first shipments were underground shipments. The East Coast barons eventually became interested in investing here. John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie among them. They formed some of the great mining companies, Oliver Mining Company Corporation, which eventually became United States Steel. The communities then formed around the iron mines as they developed, and from early on, from 1907 on, there have been significant labor-related issues with iron mining across the Iron Range. It is a highly industrialized industry, requiring a great deal of technical labor and skill, and in the war years, World War II years, it provided a significant portion of iron ore for the war effort. Eventually, the type of ore that was used played out, hematite ore, and here in Minnesota, they developed a new process using magnetite ore or magnetic ore. When I came to the Iron Range in the early 1970s, there were over 18,000 workers employed in the range. Currently, there are less than 4,500 on the 5 mines, but they still produce about 75% of all of the United States production, about 40 million tons. Significant economic changes have happened. The most significant one has been in the mid-1980s. We'll talk more about that in a moment. These are some pictures of the early mining, underground mining, and eventually became above ground mining with trains into open pits. The iron mines, of course, survive by immigrant labor, and there are 53 immigrant populations from around the world that are a part of the iron mining populations here in Minnesota. Very significant group of people. from many different countries. As I indicated, modern taconite mining contributes about $1.1 billion to the economic impact of the state of Minnesota. That is very significant. There is a competition in our area, at least by many in the state, about whether mining is sustainable environmentally, and if we need to protect our environment, should we not be satisfying more tourism. The difference, though, between the economic impacts is that tourism has about $100 million impact and iron mining about $1.1 billion impact annually. A little bit about the Chisholm United Methodist Church and a little bit about the area of the church. This is part of the ARDA survey information. We have, because of the decline in the number of workers over the years, we have a decline in the income basis, and as you can see that there's some significant declines in the upper basis versus the average in the United States. We have rather high numbers of those that are in the low income. That is because they're on fixed incomes and aging, or if they are raising families, having service jobs, many of them with service jobs. Below poverty, currently we have 21%, at near poverty 6.5%, almost 28%, 29%. In the United States average is, combining those two totals, is less than 20%. So poverty is significant here on the Iron Range. Age groupings are also significant, and they reflect the changes that have happened here on the Iron Range economically as families have had to move off the range when there were not jobs. Currently, we have had a significant decline in those under the age of 10. Compared to the United States, we have had a little of an increase in those ages 10 to 20. Those ages 21 to 60, there has been significant decline, and then we have had a significant number of increases in those that are aging in the 55 age group up, and it just shows the changes that are happening demographically here on the Iron Range. As I indicated, there have been significant ups and downs in iron mining. This particular article is from a couple of months ago. North Shore Mining is on Lake Superior. Employs about 700 workers. It has been shut down now for almost a year. The article goes on to explain that hundreds of those workers have been moving out of the area because they simply do not have work and cannot support their families. I'm going to go back there just a moment. Chisholm, Minnesota has a population of about 4,700. It's a typical small mining community. The Chisholm United Methodist Church is a beautiful building. It's one of the older buildings in town, one of only 5 that survived a disastrous fire in 1909 based upon the pine forest that surrounded the area, and only 5 buildings survived that fire. The original church building was one of them. This particular building was built in 1911 after the original building was sold to the Finnish Methodist Church. It's a beautiful building. It's all stained glass on the inside sanctuary, typical of that style and size. Seats about 150 people. The information concerning the formation of the church, the first Protestant work began in 1902, which was Methodist, and fire destroys the town, as I indicated, in 1908. Cornerstone is laid for the present building in 1910. In 1922, the stained glass is installed. 1958, an education is built with over 250 youth and children involved. In 1987, the average attendance was 92. 1968, of course, the name changed to the United Methodist Church, Chisholm United Methodist Church, and then you can see a rough listing of the membership comparisons. Currently, there are 53 members a part of the Chisholm United Methodist Church today. In 1955, there were more than 500. That became the subject of some of the research that I did as to why these changes had taken place and what was happening in some of our smaller communities. Here's a picture of the beautiful sanctuary inside the church. You'll notice that there are two large stained glass windows, and I'll mention those more prominently in a few moments because they have a significant meaning, I believe, to the church. The dynamics of a small church, of course, and particularly a rural small church, are that there are many funerals, few baptisms. I've conducted 122 funerals in my past 10 years of ministry, of which the last 6 were exclusively to the Chisholm United Methodist Church. There were, of those members of the Chisholm United Methodist Church, there were 28 who I buried. There were only about 4 baptisms, and I've conducted a couple of weddings in that time. These are all typical dynamics of a small church. Here's a little bit of the attendance comparisons, just showing the membership and then showing the attendance. Currently, our attendance after COVID did not come back to above 20 and is now closer to 15 or so. In part, that's because of the age of the congregation and simply the trends that have happened with so many in church attendance following COVID, as they've had a disassociation. I mentioned the church windows, and they're significant because I feel that in some ways they represent the dichotomy or the feelings that are in the church today. This is the beautiful Good Shepherd window. It's a typical rendering of it in stained glass, painted stained glass. It, I think, represents the way the church felt for many, many years when it was cared and comforted, when it had members, when it had a large Sunday school, when it was growing. Unfortunately, the window on the opposite side is where many members feel themselves today, and that is the Calvary window, a sense of sorrow and sadness over what has happened, and sometimes an unwillingness to really grapple with what has happened, kind of a denial, and yet a knowledge that with attendance significant dropping and membership dropping, that an end seems almost inevitable for them. I'm going to answer a couple of the questions that you've asked for. What has been the major learning out of my time through our first semester? No question about it. That major learning has been that the church is a typical small church undergoing all of the stresses of small churches today, economic, demographic, and the significant learning for me is that there was a large number of members that exited the church due to the popularity of another church attracting youth in the 1970s and 80s, which led to a significant decline. My research was virtually all around the small church and what was going on. You've asked about my goals for this course, and I'm really quite open. I've been really amazed that I've been able to do the work. It's been 40 years since I've been back in graduate work, but I have enjoyed it greatly. I've enjoyed the reading. The writing has also been relatively easy to do. What will be the focus of my research paper? Probably related to the dynamics of the small church. What is happening? Are there bases or points in which we can project what will happen in a church? Is there a possibility of turnaround, and what might that look like as we look ahead? What kind of projections would we make? That's a very broad base. I realize that. I just have not narrowed it down yet, but my interest has always been in the small church. I grew up in a small church. It has always been my first love in many, many ways. I hope that this has helped to explain a little bit about who I am. This has went on a little longer than I expected, but gratefully, very grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit about my ministry and my ministry context, and a little bit about myself. Thank you so very, very much.